set, and begin.
First things first, wow. Second things second, holy shit. The last time I made a video on the Chiefs, it was about a month ago on this channel, and the episode was all about their vulnerabilities and the things they'd have to look out for in the playoffs if they wanted to repeat as champions, just kind of everything that plagued them throughout the regular season, or at least as much as a 14-2 team even can be plagued. They were still dominant even with all of their issues. And my main summary at the end of that show was that the Chiefs had 3 big problems they were going to have to face during their playoff bye week if they wanted to go back-to-back. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes had to stop dropping way too deep and making it damn near impossible for his tackles to pass protect for him in long yardage situations. Those deep drops led to a lot of pressures and sacks, and it was a really bad habit for him. Number 2, their red zone offense was straight up bad. It was bottom 10 in the league for most of the season in terms of touchdown success rate, with the one notable exception being the Saints game, but for the vast majority of the year, they struggled to score inside the 20-yard line. And then the third main problem was the Chiefs had literally the worst red zone defense in the entire league. They allowed touchdowns on 76% of all red zone trips against them, which was horrifically bad, and the only team that was even close to their level of futility on defense was Detroit, which probably says it all right there. I truly thought that if these issues did not get worked out in time for the playoffs, this team would have been in a lot of trouble, especially against a club like Buffalo that's pretty damn good in their own right. It is hard to win in January when you are as mistake-prone and as inconsistent as KC was for most of this season, and yet, lo and behold, the Chiefs team that we all just witnessed dismantle Buffalo from top to bottom a week and a half ago, that was not the same Chiefs team that I made that episode about. That team was something else entirely. Kansas City went 5 for 5 in the red zone, which is absurd. They held the Bills to only scoring on 40% of their own red zone possessions, which if they did that all year would have been the best rate in the whole league. And most importantly, all of the structure breaking, protection sabotaging deep drops that Patrick Mahomes used to do, he didn't do that one time against Buffalo. Not once. The deepest that I saw him drop, in fact, was about 10 yards in the first quarter on a 3rd and 12 situation, which, remember, would normally have gotten him in trouble because that's a really difficult pass protection angle for an offensive tackle to try to pull off on their own. But Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid had the foresight to build in chips to help in protection on both edges, so Pat had plenty of time to sit really deep in the pocket and find a receiver for an 11-yard gain. And if you'll remember, that 11-yard pickup then led to the 4th and 1 conversion that kind of set the tone for the rest of the night. Mahomes was measured, he was disciplined, I would call it even conservative, and I mean that in the best possible way. When you look at his passing chart from that game from Next Gen Stats, I mean, it looks like one of the old Alex Smith passing charts. 76% of his attempts were 10 yards or less. They just ruthlessly attacked that Buffalo defense underneath with RPOs and other quick passing concepts, and that soft zone defense, which was playing a lot of too high safety shells, expecting the deep ball, I mean, it just got torn to shreds. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, which is extremely out of character for Kansas City, by the way, considering that Mahomes was in the top 5 in deep passing attempts this season without even playing in the final game. He averaged about 4.6 deep attempts per game throughout the regular season, but against Buffalo, he only threw it moderately deep one time. It was a remarkable change of pace for the Chiefs that paid off in a huge way, and I personally think that Mahomes' toe injury might have had more to do with that shift in mentality than we think. In fact, if you go back and look at that passing chart again, you can see that his total attempts to his left, and remember that throws in that direction would have put a lot more pressure on his injured left lead toe while trying to generate rotation in his throwing motion, They limited those kinds of throws as much as they could to spare him the pain of putting too much weight on that foot. He only had 13 attempts out of 38 total outside of those left hashes, which is significant, or rather significant because it's so small of a number. I would venture to say that because of that turf toe injury on Mahomes' lead foot in his throwing motion, he was actually forced to play more within the structure of Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy's offense than he ever has before. And within that structure, he was more efficient, less mistake prone, and I would argue an even more frustrating passer for a defense to play against than at any other point in his career. Let me show you what I mean by that, because with this more structured approach, you really saw Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy lean on something that they used to do a little bit more frequently back in the day with Alex Smith, just to kind of get reliable yards whenever they needed them, and that's run-pass option plays. The Chiefs RPO'd the Bills to death all game long because they knew that Mahomes was not his usual self, and he couldn't really make their normal offense where he runs all over the place and chucks it deep work like he usually did, and that change from a backyard style to a regimented, precise, get the ball out quick kind of style, that shift worked extremely well, and Buffalo had no answer for it. Probably the one concept that really gave the Bills the most trouble though, and it's a concept that I want to highlight today because we will likely see it again and again next week against Tampa Bay as well, is this RPO known as Dragon from a gun near trips look to the field. Now, to get into that formation before the snap, Andy Reid likes to start an empty and motion his running back into the backfield, and he does that to give Mahomes a formation check on the defense to let him know what they're in. Since a cornerback, Trey White, was out there on the running back before the motion instead of a linebacker or a safety for instance, that is an indicator for zone coverage. And with that too high safety look pre-snap as well, Mahomes can be reasonably confident that the Bills are in some kind of quarters coverage look or potentially cover 2 read, also known as palms coverage, but that's less common against 3-by-1 formations, and you see a lot of defenses check out of palms to protect themselves against hole shots down the boundary, so he's probably thinking it's some kind of quarters look instead. Either way, Mahomes is thinking 2 high safeties no matter what, and he's thinking zone. Now, in a lot of RPOs, and people get this confused all the time, they think it's all about box count to determine whether to hand it off or whether to throw it. You know, you've got 6 on 6 in the box here, meaning 6 defenders against 6 blockers. The safeties are not close down around the line of scrimmage, so you would think it would be a run, but that's not how KC operates their RPOs most of the time. It's all about leverage, not numbers. Mahomes is not reading the box count, he's reading the leverage of the Mike linebacker, Tremaine Edmunds. When you look at the end zone angle of this play, Edmunds is in an alignment that linebacker coaches call 50, meaning he's lined up on the outside shoulder of the tackle. It's basically just like the defensive line alignments that you're familiar with, where linemen are referred to as 5 techniques, 3 techniques, 1 techniques, what have you, but you slap an extra 0 on the end there for linebackers, so Edmunds is in a 50 alignment. And because Edmunds is lined up relatively wide here over that offensive tackle and not further inside in a 30 or maybe a 20, Mahomes knows that the slant window behind him to Tyreek Hill is going to be probably wide open, especially if Edmunds gets pulled wider towards the flat by Kelce's drag route, which he does, and just that little movement from Edmunds creates all the space that Patrick needs to hit Hill over the middle and get a first down. So again, box count for this Dragon RPO does not matter. It's going to be a throw like 80% of the time no matter what anyway. It's just about alignment and which linebackers can be influenced to create passing windows. 1 quarter later, the Chiefs did the exact same thing again. They motioned from empty back into gun near trips. That motion check indicated man coverage this time because Matt Milano was shadowing the running back, and we still had 2 high safeties with a favorable box count. However, what's different this time is that from the end zone angle, you can see that Edmunds is in a 30 alignment, not a 50. So he's further inside and more of a threat to that slant window. But because he is leveraged further inside, that also means that he's giving away that he has 0 responsibility for Travis Kelce running that drag route to the flat. Which means that when you go back to the high angle in the all-22, the only guy left to cover Kelce is the strong safety from about 12 yards away. Remember, the motion from the running back indicated man coverage. The corners are also lined up in man looks, Edmonds' alignment tells you that it's man as well. This is basically free yards because of how far off that safety is, and Mahomes knows that he's got those yards before the ball is even snapped. All he had to do was just get it out quick to Kelce, and then Kelce could do the rest with his athleticism and yak skills. It's the same dragon call as before, just with a different throw. How about one quarter after that, where again they used the motion to get into trips to get the man coverage indicator on Matt Milano. It's a single high safety look this time, probably cover one because the strong safety has creeped down to restrict Kelce's space on the drag route and take that away. But once more, it's all about the linebackers for this read and nothing else. Edmonds is lined up straight on the running back, so he's telling you what his job is with that alignment. We know that it's probably cover one, so he's going to go wherever the running back goes, and Mahomes knows that too. So he's expecting that once the back flows to the left on the run fake, Edmonds is going to follow him. He doesn't really have a choice. He can't just sit in that slant window forever and then fill the run or play the back in coverage. He's got to go now, which means no matter what, that space will be vacated. And with that vacated space over the middle, that gives Tyreek Hill more room to work on the slant. And then with Tyreek's speed, he can turn that little slant into a 71-yard gain after the catch. It might not be the normal way that the Chiefs generate big plays with their receivers, but they were still able to do it from this quick passing philosophy. And the fact that they were able to rip off huge chunks without even pushing the ball down the field, that is what would terrify me if I were a Buccaneers coach right now. Finally, however, I also want to show you the ultimate culmination of this Dragon RPO in the fourth quarter, after Mahomes had already gotten 100 passing yards on this concept alone just from executing it a few times. But on the last time that Reed called it, that is when they finally ran the ball. And no, they didn't run it just because they were burning clock or anything like that, but again, because of where the linebackers were lined up pre-snap. Look at Edmonds and Milano here. I mean, they've tried everything at this point, and now both of them are lined up on the passing strength of the formation because of the blitz call that Buffalo has on here. They're trying to see if maybe bringing pressure can work against this formation for once. But again, because the Bills had no linebackers lined up in the B gap on the front side of the run, box count did not matter. Leverage and alignment did. Mahomes knew that the run would work because of that play side double team having such a huge advantage against Edmonds trying to scrape all the way over from the backside. And of course it did work because of that alignment advantage. KC got down inside the 10-yard line on that run, and they scored yet again a few plays later. There's a lot that the Bills could have done differently in that game, but I'll be honest, I don't know if they ever would have stopped that play. In football, at some point it just comes down to, can my dudes beat your dudes one-on-one when we really need them to? And over again for the Bills throughout that game, the answer to that was a resounding no. And what's scary for Tampa Bay this weekend is that Kansas City has now shown growth and evolution in ways that we've never even seen before in the Patrick Mahomes era. They've always been great at throwing deep or making all these crazy off-script plays to Kelce and Hill that generate huge chunks of yardage, but in terms of playing in a very methodical, precise, and heavily structured passing game, as much as they wanted that to be their identity for the last few years, it really hasn't been, or at least not until now. We've known for a long time now that the Chiefs are really good at hitting home runs, but it seems like they finally figured out how to hit doubles in the gap and steal bases too. This is the most complete team that the Kansas City Chiefs have maybe ever had, and other than health and depth along the offensive line because they've sustained a lot of injuries, I can't really think of anything wrong with this group. I mean, they've won, 25 of their last 26 games with Patrick Mahomes, and they didn't even play their best football in a lot of those games. That's why I made that episode originally. They weren't playing good football all the time, and yet they were still winning. If I was a Bucs fan, that would terrify me. I'm not saying that KC is unbeatable because any team can lose to any other team in any given week. And yes, I'm looking at you, Jets and Rams. But what I am saying is that if the Chiefs are going to be beat, it's going to take one hell of a game plan by Tampa Bay to get it done. A game plan that, ironically, I think I have some ideas for. What kind of ideas exactly? Well, it's complicated. I'll be back in a few days to explain exactly what I mean. Until then, cheers.
Ready, set, and begin.
Thank you for watching this week's episode, and thank you to this week's sponsor, NordVPN. If you're like me and you cut the cord a long time ago, the most difficult part about that decision has always been finding a way to stream live NFL games, as well as NFL Network and all the great NFL Films programming that comes with it. But with NordVPN, it's now easier than ever to do all of that legally. All you have to do is download NordVPN, select a server somewhere in Europe like Germany, and once you connect to that German server, that will give you access to the European version of NFL's Game Pass subscription service, which is the service that I use to make all of these episodes every single week. In the American version of Game Pass, you do not get access to live streaming of NFL games, but in the European one, you do get access to every single regular and postseason game, and the Super Bowl, and it's $100 cheaper than NFL Sunday Ticket would be on top of an existing DirecTV subscription. Plus, it also comes with all of the normal NFL Game Pass features as well, like NFL Network Live 24/7, the All-22 Coaches Tape, full game replays and highlights for games going back the last decade, and tons of NFL Films and NFL Network programming like America's Game and A Football Life. NFL Game Pass streaming on NordVPN is by far the best way to stream live NFL content, plus the league still gets paid too through that Game Pass subscription, so it's not even pirating. It's all legal and everybody wins, especially you, the football fan. If you're interested in upgrading your game watching setup both for the rest of the season and for next year and beyond, and you want to try this out, you can get 70% off a 2-year plan plus an additional month free on top of that, and that makes it cost about $3.50 a month. You can get that deal at nordvpn.com/BrettKollmann4 and by using my promo code BrettKollmann4 at checkout. Again, thank you to Nord for sponsoring this week's show and for giving all of us a better option to stream live games this season. As for me and channel news, I've got yet another episode coming out later this week. As I said, that's going to be on the Tampa Bay offense against the Chiefs defense. I think it's going to be fascinating, and I think you guys are going to like it a lot. And then I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do a Super Bowl recap or if I'm going to jump directly into the draft. I guess we'll see what happens in the Super Bowl and then go from there. But yeah, I have a lot of content coming your way, so I'll see you guys in a few days with another episode, and until then, later.